So welcome to our second finance peer group session. And I don't know if you looked at the first session in the peer group session, but this is being recorded and we will upload the recording as soon as it's available, as well as the documents that you're going to see. We created a PowerPoint presentation of all the slides that will be uploaded. We will also upload the Q&A once that's completed. We don't actually have a Q&A function on these presentations, but if you use the chat function, just enter your question as we go, and you'll be able to ask them at the end of it. We want to go ahead through the whole presentation first and then complete answering all the questions that you have. And then Carol is monitoring that, and she will put in the answers, and any questions we can't get to, we will work on the answers later and then post that up too. And where you find it, if you haven't discovered it yet, is if you go into the AEUW California website, you can go to branch tools, and the first line up there is the peer group. And you click on that, and then you pick up the Finance Committee to find our session. So that should work. What I am going to start off doing is pulling up sharing our slide. And here we go. And I'm going to
slideshow. Yeah.
Yes, I know it's slideshow, but I may have to.
Then play from yeah.
So we have this, and want to welcome all of you. I am Kathy Ford, the CFO here, and you met all of us at the first session. And these are the topics we're going to go over today. I'm going to go over budgeting and the financial review process. And then Indrani is going to go over the monthly reporting and accounting system options that you have that most branches consider to record all your branch transactions and create your reports. Cheryl will go over California sales tax, and yes, we are charitable organizations. We do not pay state or federal income tax, but that doesn't exempt us from other taxes, such as California sales tax. And you learned about the raffle reporting before. So it doesn't exempt you from everything. I will then go over briefly the concept of some 1099 reporting. We are still working on some of the issues related to those, particularly in regard to TechTrack. And once we're complete with that, we can present our findings as well. And then afterwards, we will have the Q&A session. But first, sharing. And I want to learn a little bit more about all of our branches. And so most of you, I think, are probably a branch financial officers, and everybody else is welcome here. But we have a polling, and we'd like you to answer all the questions. There are 4 questions, so you answer them, and then you can scroll down and answer all of them. It doesn't take but about a minute if you can go ahead and work on the poll and enter your answers for your branch. So we have, in terms of branches answering, we should have about 25 people here so far. So it looks like, most of you completed. It's a pretty even mix there on size, except we don't have any of the mega branches. Most of you don't sell merchandise. Simplifies things, but I don't have a lot of answers there yet. And we see a lot of Excel spreadsheets on system. That is definitely the simplest. Again, we don't have a lot of, well, we're getting fairly few answers. Most do not have silent auction fundraisers. But, you know, a good chunk of you do or are considering it.
There were 4 questions. Yvonne, I don't know if you need to do all 4.
Yeah, everybody, they're all mandatory.
Yeah, got it.
So,
Okay.
yes, you do. So we're showing 28 participants, so we should have 25 answers in total. You know, it looks like we're getting more. And so I think we're doing okay. This is interesting that we have 0. It's not surprising that we don't have too many branches that would clear 176. So, you know, this is our biggest chunk is going to be 1 to 75, but we have a fair number of this over 76. That's 22%. That's pretty good. All right, is everybody complete with the poll? Great. Okay. So here are the results. Nobody wants to sell merchandise. There's a good reason for that, I'm sure. And then the systems got over half using Excel spreadsheets. Some manual ledgers. Those are probably branches that have been around for a long time and have that in place. We have 5 using Quicken, 1 using QuickBooks, and 1 using some other method. And there are other record keeping items, so that's good. And then we have yes answers for the silent auction fundraisers and 1 person considering. So there'll be good information here just quickly for you to know. All right, thank you for sharing. I have to get my all right. So we're going to, again, I just want to remind everybody to mute themselves.
Slideshow.
All right. So we have gotten some good, interesting results. And I am going to discuss the board responsibilities for effective fiscal management. We do know you're, predominantly branch financial people, and you have a lot to do with this board financial effectiveness. But you're not the only one responsible for effective fiscal management. You're just a very key person on the board who's going to help the board really manage the branch effectively. The board does review and discuss the annual operating budget, and they really need to understand what the composition of it is, what's recurring, what needs to be planned for, if any changes need to be planned for. And the treasurer is so important in creating that information. They are really, it's a plan. The budget is a plan. It's a document to allocate resources that can be limited in many instances and make sure that you're in place to achieve your plan. They get financial reports. They need to ask for them and they need to read them. They need to understand them and ask questions about them to make sure they understand it. The board can require an annual review or audit by an independent entity. This is not mandatory by the state, AUW California, but it is highly recommended. And what it consists of, if you're a very large branch, excuse me, that flipped. If you're a very large branch, you might hire somebody to do it. But in most cases, you're not a large branch, and this would be a large amount of money to do it. But you can get a committee or a person who is not involved with handling the money or making the financial decisions and the fiscal management, and they can do a review for you and present that to the board. So this is what the finance officer is going to be responsible for in terms of evaluating, helping the board evaluate the financial health and stability of your finances. Really important, and Indrani will go over this more, prepare monthly financial statements and include an analysis of how you're performing against your planned budget. Be aware of relevant federal and state charitable tax issues and legal liabilities. And that's one of the reasons we have these peer groups, why we had the session on government filing. And the website has a lot of information as well, so use it. This is also key. I call it like a permanent file that every branch should have. This is keeping all financial statements, IRS forms, correspondence, any sales and use tax certificates you might have. Tax determination letter should definitely be a permanent file item. You get one of those usually, one from the state, one from the feds, and you need to keep that to show the numbers when you're reporting every year. And then, if somebody who's going to donate, they may want to see those numbers. Paid checks, deposits, contracts, all these documents that should be consistent with how long you hold them. And this really helps. If you pass on the position to somebody else, they will have a good set of documents to understand what they need to do going forward. And one of these things I know that probably is intriguing to all of you: adhere to all local, state, and federal charitable tax laws and generally accepted accounting principles and practices. And I'm sure you all know exactly what those are, right? You're all CPAs. But, I think that's where you get as much information as possible. If you have questions that are not on the website or have been covered by a presentation here, then you can always contact me, the CFO, and present your question. So here we're getting back to budgeting. Why would you prepare it? It's your branch plan for the year, and you have to know what the financial part of that is if you're going to be able to execute it. Now, ideally, the current board would start the process really 3 to 6 months prior to the year end and do a preliminary budget, because they have a better understanding at this point about what a budget could be composed of. How do you prepare a budget? You work with your leadership as financial officer to prepare a preliminary budget that specifies the programs and activities the branch wants to run. And so you have seen what the recurring costs. You know you're going to have to pay for the PO box that you use or a Zoom license. You see the regular recurring. If you plan events, you know there's going to be some cost involved in that. But it's not just you doing it. You would be contacting board members, committee chairs, anybody who's involved in an activity that needs dollars signed. So gather the historical information as well, and that gives you an idea of what the standard cost might be. It's really good. Get an estimate of what you think the year we're in now, the current year, as well as the year before that you know is finished, you used to file those November 15th deadline reports. And so you know historically what it is. Here is just go back. These are some standard budget lines. Remember, the goal of all this is to get the budget approval. Everybody understands what has been proposed, what the assumptions are, and then it gets approved. So you prepare a report with the total and supplementary budgets for individual programs separate from the branch operating costs. Include that historical information. Estimate what you think it's going to be for this year and the prior year. Ask other officers and program chairs to review your budget carefully. And after the budget has been reviewed and revised where necessary, present it to the branch board for approval. And remember, you have to, if somebody is coming to you and saying, well, I want to double the number of Nick Whistle girls we send, and it has to work. How can you do that? What's that going to cost? What fundraising would you do to be able to support that? A budget needs to be workable. You can't assume you could also, a cost that is pretty fixed and required can't be reduced in half unless you come up with a different solution if it's necessary to run your branch. So this is a sample budget. And as you can see, this may not be exactly the way you would report it every month or for the year, because I break out, here's branch revenue and expenses. So this is standalone. This Tech Trek, you see it standalone, that has 1,000. You're saying we're going to use up the reserves we built up in the prior 2 years and use it in the budget for the following year, so we can cover some of these additional camp costs. Here's local scholarships, and same thing. This is, you're looking back, you're making certain assumptions, and you're making a proposal. And you can see this is going negative, but here's the solution. You see local scholarships that are the raffle fundraiser is shown separately, and it's going to make up for the deficit. And why is it shown separately? If you remember in the first session, we said raffles are, you have to do a report to the state of California, and 90% of your raffle income must go to support your project. And so this clearly shows that you're getting 640 out of 700, and that's costs are less than that 10% maximum. And then this you can show all. This, gives the responsibilities, but here you look at in this sample budget, what are the assumptions? And so you're giving reason behind the numbers. Why does it look this way? And you can see they were making a change in the member event income. They made an assumption that they could would budget for a higher income, and the expenses would actually generate more because they were modifying how they did that. So thought processes go on. How can we make things better? How can we make things different? How do we deal with other issues coming down the pike, such as increase in Tech Trek camp costs? So that's a general overview and a sample. Now, the financial review. I'd like people to put in the chat if they do a financial review. You know, I can't see that. Just note and say we do or we do not, and we'll figure out how many we have. And in the Q&A, I'll ask the question again. So it is highly recommended that your financial reports do get reviewed, and that ensures the members and the general public, if you say, look, we have independent people look at the financial record and they do a review. It's not a full-blown audit, but they're doing certain checks to make sure everything looks reasonable. So these are some of the review procedures. If you look at the bylaws, you look if anything's changed that would require the branch to do something differently. Look at the minutes of all the meetings. That shows that they're having meetings per their bylaws, and they have recorded what happened in those meetings. They look at the financial procedures for developing the budget. How did you do it? What are your process for signing checks and approving unbudgeted expenses? Look at bank statements. Do you see those the bank statements can be reconciled easily to the financial transaction record? Look at the receipts, disbursements for any expense that went out, it's a supported check disbursement, final financial statement of the fiscal year, and just look at the fundraising activities and see the receipts and how that works. So these are some additional things and how the processes would work where, for example, you're looking at receipts on the books against the bank statement. Make sure there's no long delays between here it is and on our record as being handed in as a contribution or membership dues, and it took this long to get into the bank. Pay checks against the checkbook and cash disbursement ledger. Make sure they're showing up in a reasonable time in the bank statement. Look at account reconciliations. On those bank statements, you should see a reconciliation to the books each month. And then, you know, if they have asset and liabilities, what are they? Where are they? And then look at the latest filings. You know, were they filed on time and what was filed? So then the financial reviewers would present a brief report to the membership board stating their finding and certifying to the best of their knowledge that everything appeared correct. And I know generally accepted accounting principles and practice may not be well known, but it looks like what transactions are taking place are being recorded on a timely basis. They're approved and they're accurate, and you're following your bylaws and procedures. So I am now going to turn this over to Indrani, and she's going to go over financial reporting and accounting system options. So Indrani, just let me know when you want me to advance the slide.
Yes, you can. Hello, everybody. I'm Indrani Chatterjee. I will talk first about accounting system options and then financial reporting. Kathy, next slide. This is accounting system options. From poll, I see that 56% of you, 56% are using Excel. Yes, Excel is very flexible and it is a workbook, a spreadsheet management software with a data analysis tool. QuickBook and Quicken, they are the accounting software.
Sorry. This sometimes flips.
QuickBook and Quicken, both are accounting softwares. QuickBook is satisfied to meet all accounting needs for the branch. Quicken Classic Business version is also very good option for the branch to fulfill the branch financial need. I will talk about the Excel a little more because I see that 56% of the audience are using Excel worksheet. And Excel does not offer the integration, and also Excel has one drawback. The manual data entry you have to do. I'm sure those who are using Excel are doing the data entry, and it doesn't integrate with your bank statement or credit cards. And you have to tailor your chart of account so that you can use that more often. It is based on your requirement. And for invoice and billing, you have to create your own template, where QuickBook and Quicken has a built-in template. Just you have to modify based on your requirement. And Excel financial statement. Excel, you have to set up your financial statement with the formula and the requirement you need every month. Whereas QuickBook and Quicken, when you enter the transaction, it creates automatically the balance sheet and income statement based on your journal entry. And that way you don't have to do another step to create that a financial statement. You can create customized profit loss financial statement in Excel. QuickBook and Quicken has that. However, Excel has built in many functions that can provide instant solutions, statistical and financial. QuickBook and Quicken has a limited, because they only get the data that user has entered in the system. It cannot provide you worse level that Excel can. However, those who are using Quicken and QuickBook, you have the option to download your data to Excel to make a maybe a different way, fashionable way, your financial statement. But you have that option. Just because you are using QuickBook and Quicken, you can also use your Excel to do the reporting. I like Excel very much for budget and complex data analysis, which is not possible in QuickBook and Quicken. They have a standardized method, standardized reporting that will help to do the budgeting because of the storing the historical data. Excel has one very good thing that I find better than any financial software, because it has a wide range of chart, graph, table, illustration capability that none other accounting software can provide you. And that's why Excel is one way. Excel has some disadvantages, but Excel is good to use for the smaller branches, those who are not ready to move to QuickBooks or Quicken. But QuickBook and Quicken's data security is much more higher level than Excel. However, Excel has one thing you can do. Once you finish your financial statement for year financial statement at the end of June, then you can log that Excel workbook with a password so that only you can make the changes and other people can only view your Excel worksheet, but they will not have ability to make any changes to your data. And you can provide that Excel worksheet as a PDF format to everybody, those who want to see your financial statement. Excel training is very simple training for the simple Excel version, but Excel, that comprehensive version, comprehensive training is needed for the advanced version, where you have a VLOOKUP and pivot table, all that you can use it. And Excel is very less expensive software than QuickBook, especially QuickBook. Quicken is cheaper than QuickBook, but Excel is less expensive than QuickBook and Quicken. Now, newer version computers are coming with a built-in Office that has the Excel. But if you want to use Excel 365, yes, you have to pay the subscription, yearly subscription price. And Quicken QuickBook is designed to protect your data. And QuickBook is less expensive for the 501c3 branches. And QuickBook needs deep level training. In-depth training is needed before you use the QuickBook. Quicken also need training, but not like the way QuickBook needs. Kathy, next slide. Now we will go to the month-end review and report preparation. Finance officers every month will prepare, before prepare the report, they will check how many checks they've received, how many checks they have, they issued to the comply with the obligations. And very important portion is the reconciliation of your bank statement with your book record, which is either you have in Excel or workbook, or Excel workbook, Quicken or QuickBook. And based on that, you have to create your month-end reports. It is a very good practice to prepare your month-end report every month. Activity report, actual to budget report, fund report, and your cash flow report, which is not overwritten. Cash flow report is also important. And that will help you to see that what are the unusual things happen that maybe you need to research or you need to notify board that whatever happened. Kathy, next slide. This is the process chart. Also, this is, as I mentioned, that Excel can create different charts. This is created in Excel. This process chart is a repetitive work for finance officer. That's why I created this way, that what you will do, you will open your mail, deposit checks, cash, and whatever obligation you will issuing checks to the vendor or the recipient, and recording all your transactions, reconcile your bank statement, and finalizing your ending cash balance, which is the cash flow, and prepare your monthly reports for the board meeting. Kathy, next slide. This is the actual to budget statement activity once the month one, which is the July month, will end. Your budget, a preliminary budget, as Kathy mentioned, preliminary budget will be done by the previous finance officer. However, new finance officer and new board members, they will approve the final budget, and based on that, monthly activity will take place. This is the 1 month activity happen. You can see that branch dues income, 2,063, that is coming, 2,000 coming from the previous year, deferred revenue, and $63 they received in the current month. Member event income. These are the month of July's actual activity. Kathy, next slide. And this is again the chart created in the Excel. This is the plus point for Excel, but QuickBook, we can also create this for you. Kathy, previous chart. Kathy, previous.
Sorry.
The chart one, another, right. You can see that your budget is revenue budget, and actual is very little because only 1 month activity is showing in this chart. Same with the expenses. Next slide. This is the financial position. This is month 1 beginning. July 1st, all cash position that is coming from the last year. June 30th, cash position should be equal to July 1 cash position. Because between June 30th and July 1st, I don't think any branches will have any activity. And this is the actual is showing in the last column. Kathy, next slide. And once 12 months will have completed, then your year 1 budget actual will look like the one, and that will compare with your budget. And that will give a very clear picture that how in branch has done. Over here, I see branch has almost done very good. They kept a very good close eye with their budget versus actual. This is the ideal, but not always that happens. Next slide. And now you can see the chart, it looks much more nicer than before because you have this has completed 12 months, 12 months actual and 12 months budget revenue and expenses is showing. And I will have another slide, one more slide, Kathy. This will be the year-end financial position. You can see that year-end financial position, cash has increased 6,200. And that is good. And this year-end financial position should be the beginning of the year 2's financial position. And this is the way branch needs to keep track of their expenses and revenues. And if monthly reporting, monthly reconciliation is very important so that year-end finance officer will not spend a substantial amount of time to reconcile what happened to the unreconciled items. I will recommend for finance officers, please reconcile your books every month so that you will have a better position at the year. Now I will give it to Carol. Carol will talk about the taxes. Hi, Carol.
Hi, thanks, Indrani. Yes, so my section is really to talk about sales taxes. And often we think, well, we're a tax exempt organization. Why are we paying sales taxes? Well, that's one of those issues that varies from state to state. And indeed in California, nonprofits are subject to sales taxes in many, many instances. As you probably found out, you have to pay them when you buy supplies to do something that involves your branch. But also, if you are conducting certain fundraising activities, those activities may be also subject to sales taxes. So let's go to the next slide, because we have, in general, if you're selling tangible property, and there were a few people that were selling merchandise, but quite a few also that are having auctions. So tangible property is subject to California sales tax. So if you have, for example, in my branch, we do have t-shirts and books and so on for sale. So that would count as tangible property. An auction of goods, the goods are also subject to sales tax. And one of the things that there are many instances where food might be involved, and there are lots of rules that have to do with selling food. So is it a cold food or a hot food? Is it a beverage? If so, with what kind? Is it carbonated? Is it alcoholic? Is it food that's designed for consumption on site? And also, of course, there are lots and lots of health regulations regarding food sales. So I would say if you're doing an event that involves food, it would be really a good idea to employ a caterer who's going to know all those rules and handle all of that for you. But in any case, looking carefully at the tax rules. If you have an event that includes food and something else, food and entertainment, for example, you want to keep track of the various elements separately, because some may be subject to sales tax and others not. There's a big publication, publication 18, that's specifically designed for nonprofit organizations. And you can get this publication. It's 44 pages long, but on the next slide, I'll show you some pages to really pay attention to look for the elements that are important. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Here's just a picture of the front of the publication. And for food specifics, pages 25 to 29 are going to be helpful. For sales of items, pages 36 to 39. After this webinar concludes, as Kathy said, you're going to have access to our slide deck. And so I've given you both, this is a click, just a control click to go to the state website and get publication 18. And if that doesn't work, we have the actual URL there for you to obtain that publication. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, which in terms of how does one actually pay the sales taxes? Well, the first thing is you apply for a seller's permit. And so if you have 3 or fewer sales events per year, you can get individual permits. So for example, more of you had an auction than those that said they were selling merchandise. So if you have just one auction, you can get a temporary permit and then just file a report for that specific event. But if you have something that's ongoing, as I said, we have t-shirts that are sold available at every meeting, then it may be easier to get a regular permit. So you apply for the seller's permit, and again, here's the web address, or just basically a click and download on how to apply for a seller's permit. Once you have the seller's permit, if, for example, with those t-shirts, you're going to buy them from a wholesaler, you don't need to pay sales tax to the wholesaler. You'll just be collecting sales tax from the end user at the after the sale is concluded. Now, most people would find it easiest to set your sales price such that it will cover the amount of sales tax, and be sure to let the customers know that. So rather than saying, oh, the shirt is $20 and then you have to calculate the sales tax on top of that, make it $22 or $23 that it's going to cover the price of the tax, and not have to cause you a lot of change making things. You remit your sales tax with a sales and use return, and generally that would be once a year. When you apply for the seller's permit, they're going to ask you, what do you think is going to be your overall volume of sales? And I would say for most of our branches, you would have a low volume of sales, so that you would have just an annual report, and they will tell you what date it will be due, and then you can file that. They recommend obviously that you do it online, but there is also a form that can be downloaded. And again, I've given you the web address to get the form. Now, you may be aware that the sales tax, there's the state sales tax, and then many cities, counties, or other entities have an extra tax that goes on top of it. In California, the state collects everything, and then they remit the local taxes to the local entities. If you want to see the sales taxes, here again is a web link that you can see for specific cities or counties what the sales tax is for those. So that is the kind of the upshot of sales taxes. And see, there was one question in the chat that the food, it doesn't actually, where you get the food doesn't matter. So if it's donated food, you refer to it as self-cater, and that would be very likely still subject to sales tax. So again, I would say get publication 18 and read pretty carefully the rules that pertain to food, and if you're thinking of something that would involve that. So that is what we have to say about sales tax. And we'll take some other questions when we get to the questions and answers after the final section here. So go ahead and put them in the chat and we will try and come back to them. Kathy, back to you.
Yes, okay. I am going to go over some aspects of the Form 1099. This can be a fairly complex area. And we are still researching some of the scenarios of a 1099 requirement. So we will have more information on that particular section when we finish that research. But we did want to get certain important information that you would need for year-end filing of Form 1099. And I'm kind of jumping. If you look at the purpose of Form 1099, I will go over that. But on C on this slide, it says payments of $600 or more must be reported on the form. So if your annual, and this is the calendar year payments to a vendor, say for rent or something like that, is under that $600, you have no reporting requirement. So the IRS, I guess, doesn't want to look at $10 payments, so they did set a limit that it has to be $600 or more to be required. So what's the purpose of Form 1099? It's to report transactions to the IRS by an entity. This says business entities, but that includes nonprofits. You might think, well, I'm not in business, so why would I have to file these reports? But the IRS looks at you as an entity that would need to file these forms if you're making the types of transactions they capture. And again, the cumulative calendar amounts exceed $600 or more. So includes corporations, sole proprietorships, partnerships, etc. And what is it for? It's for payments to individuals, partnerships, associations, sole proprietorships, but not corporations. So they have other controls on reported income for corporations. So if you pay a corporation for rent, you do not have to report that rent on a 1099. Let's say it was $605, but it was to a corporation. There would be no reporting requirement. So types of services that may require reporting. Let's say you're a very large branch and you engage a bookkeeping service or a tax, or not a tax service, but a CPA. And you end up paying them $600 for the year, and their sole proprietorship or their an LLP. You would then be issuing a 1099, and that's on. This type is on the 1099 NEC, that's non-employee compensation. This is relatively new. Some of these things used to be on the 1099 MISC, but now they're on this separate type of 1099. However, they kept the attorney services on MISC, and I don't know the story behind it, but I'm sure it's interesting. You would also put rent on that. I think in many cases, the branches will not clear that $600 hurdle rate. I don't know of any branches that would pay $600 or more for a speaker for their meeting. None of the branches I'm a member of do. But maybe rent. You have an event and you have to pay rent, and the entity you're using for that rent is not a corporation. Then you could end up needing to file that 1099 MISC. So again, it's any of these items paid to an individual, partnership, association, sole proprietorship, or other non-corporate entity. So that's the first thing to find out is this a corporation? That knocks them out. Is it $600 or more? If it's under, it knocks them out. So what kind of rental payments? Maybe this says office space when you're looking at the IRS literature, but you may pay rent for your branch meetings to an entity. Some branches will rent from a church or other entity. You might have equipment rental. Perhaps you're having a fundraising event and you have to pay for a booth at that event, or the venue for a program. Let's say you're renting space at a hotel. Now, if that's a corporation, you don't have to worry. If it's not, you would need to issue the 1099. Again, it must equal or exceed $600, and it's not a corporation. Now, the other category, this is the one that's kind of complex for us and we're still working on. It's awards or prizes. And again, they have to equal or exceed $600 in the calendar year. It could be cash. It could be something else. You buy a ticket because you're sending girls to Nick Whistle and your branch is paying for their travel expenses. If those travel expenses exceeded the $600, then you would issue a 1099 to the individual that you benefited, that you awarded with payments of those travel expenses. Now, some of you look, well, what about scholarships? A lot of branches do local scholarships. They may be doing it through SPF, and that simplifies things possibly for you. But frequently, a branch does it as well. And the IRS changed their requirements not too long ago. And they said you don't need to report on a 1099, and it's not taxable to the recipient if the scholarship is set up and complies with the IRS rules. So we don't get to define what scholarship is. We can't say, well, this is a scholarship and you don't have to report scholarships and they're non-taxable. It has to meet the IRS requirements. And we will post those requirements in more detail up on our website related to this session as well. We are doing a little research with SPF. When they handle it, they have a standard letter that they issue to recipients indicating, how they have to use the scholarship, because not only is the institution, the eligible institution specified in the IRS regs, the expenses that are allowable for the scholarship to be used to pay is also defined. Again, this can get more complex and there are exceptions to this, but largely speaking, it says this scholarship is to an eligible institution and it is being used to spend on things such as tuition. It's being spent on books required for the class you take, spent on fees that are required by the institution for you to attend. In other words, they'll bill you and it's going to have that tuition, it's going to have certain fees that all students have to pay. Really anything that's required for you to attend the institution or required for you to take the coursework that you're taking. So we'll list the information that the IRS provides on that as well. And if we will try to get that SPF letter and post that, it just would be suggested what you're asking the girl to commit to on reporting and committing to using the scholarship in the way that meets the IRS requirement. So if that all happens, then you don't have an IRS issue. Now, Tech Trek sponsorships are viewed as an award by the IRS. And we're looking at it and said, could this be reportable? Most branches pass through the contributions they get from individual donors directly to the Special Projects Fund, and the branch does not record anything in their books for that, and they don't make the payment by the branch, and therefore it's considered a pass-through of an individual donor's contribution for these awards. And individuals are not required to report using Form 1099. So if all your donors that are going in and saying, here, I'm writing out my check to AUW California SPF, and they hand it to the finance, the Tech Track branch, Tech Track treasurer, which sometimes is the branch treasurer, and they put it on that SPF deposit form and send it in to the camp that they use. That is not reportable. So we know that is what we're researching are what other scenarios do we have, and what is the requirement in getting support from SPF, because they've done research on this as well to get those requirements. Now, let's say at the end of the year, you determine, well, I paid more in rent to this non-corporate entity for the calendar year. Maybe I had an event that required me to pay for services, and it's a non-corporate service provider. So I have to fill out this 1099. And on all 1099s, you're going to have to put the name, the address, and the taxpayer ID number. On a 1099 miscellaneous, the rent payments go in box 1, other payments go in box 3, and that would include prizes and awards. So 1099 MISC is also used for those awards. The 1099 NEC, let's say you had a CPA or you had a speaker at one of your fundraising events, and that was a more expensive speaker. Payments for services go in box 1. So this is interesting too, because you can't just print something off the internet. You go on the IRS site and they will have their forms there. You can't just print that on. And if you ever try to pull that up, it's going to tell you, you can't use this. You have to get the scannable 1099 miscellaneous for copy A. And copy B for the recipient can be a copy of copy A. And the recipient's copies must be mailed by January 31st. So this is, and you're looking at the 12 months ended. So you're looking at the last half of the prior fiscal year and the first half of this fiscal year. The scannable 1099s plus the scannable 1096 must be mailed to the IRS postmarked by no later than February 29th. And the 1096 is a form where you're saying, okay, I'm the person submitting that I've sent out these 1099s, and you check off what kind of 1099 it is, and you include it. You include all the copies, copy A of that 1099 that you sent, and there are instructions on how to do that. The 1099 NEC, it's the same requirements for 1099, but you have to get it postmarked to the IRS no later than January 31st. So it has an earlier filing requirement for the IRS. Then you have to look at all the number of 1099 miscellaneous and NECs that you're filing and report it on the scannable 1096. So all these forms have to be scannable. Now you're probably going to hope you don't issue more than 10 of these, because if so, that 1099, if you issue more than 10 of them, you have to e-file effective January 31st, 2024 for all 1099s issued in 2023. So I don't think many of you would have that. And so hopefully you can just use the regular mail them in. What we have here, this is simply the URL. You can go in and see a copy of that, and instructions are included with the form. This is the 1099 NEC, and this is that 1096 that you're going to send into the IRS. So that is what I have. As I said, we are continuing to research this because we want to make sure that we have completely accurate information, primarily for awards, and when it is really you're just going to have to file in when you're not, and why you would not have to file a 1099. So part of this research will include, we're going to send a survey out to branches to see which branches are simply passing through those donations, and which is, I believe, most of you, 501c4 organizations would really need to do that for the donations to be deductible to the donor. But we really want to see, are there some branches that might do something somewhat different because they're 501c3s, and if they do, what are they doing? Are they filing the 1099s? There are some branches who concluded they needed to and are filing, and what were they basing that on? So we're trying to get more information on that, and we will certainly be posting it when we have that. So I'm going to stop sharing.
So Kathy, we have a couple of questions about 1099s for rent, and are cities, colleges, and churches considered corporations? Because we have branches that are using some of those entities.
Right. You would have to check with the organization, how are they organized? Because they could be incorporated, and that's all you need to know. Are you incorporated? And so when you're dealing with that would be a question when you're asking them. You can give them a form W-9 and say, you need to tell me what type of entity you are, and then are these 1099able, yes or no? Which was, a large organization, a business who was adding vendors on would be capturing that information, and their accounting system would go in and pick out those that are non-corporate and start looking at the $600 rule and determining what 1099s had to be sent out. So you just need to ask, how are you organized? Are you a corporation? And that will tell you. And you can get W-9s right off the website, the IRS website, and ask them to complete them as well.
Great. And then there were a couple of questions about the 1099s for one for Nick Whistle.
Mm-hmm.
Is it for just travel expenses, or paying the expenses of registering? Which I think the question of a scholarship, there is a very specific definition of a scholarship according to the IRS. So a girl going to Nick Whistle, that wouldn't really be considered a scholarship in the IRS's eyes, right?
No, it wouldn't, because that is a convention. They're going to a convention. They are not going to a program where you have an institution that grants either primarily degrees. It can be an AA degree, but they grant degrees, or in some cases certificates for a qualified program. And Nick Whistle does not qualify. I'm not aware of anything else that AAUW programs that would be classified as a scholarship by the IRS. So Nick Whistle payments don't. Right now, we're looking primarily that it's the travel expenses, but we're going to get more information on that, and we need that from national. This is a national program, so we would ask, would we include that the registration? But clearly, it's the branch. National isn't processing any kind of program for getting girls there. They're charging registration for it. They're not issuing any kind of special funds like a camp does and says, you come to camp, it's going to cost you $1,100, and you need to get donors to donate into your branch and then pass that on to SPF. So that Nick Whistle is not like that. So clearly the travel is, we're going to contact national or their registration fees. The IRS, looking at it basically would say, yeah, that's an award because you're paying for this award so these girls can attend, that are young women can attend that convention. And as we said, it doesn't have to be cash, although you're paying cash, but it's registration. That may not be tangible, but you're paying cash to benefit that girl and award her by sending her to Nick Whistle.
Great. And then the other question was a 501c3 branch that collects Tech Trek contributions and then sends it to the SPF. And I think that that's where we're going to get further information, right, from
Yes.
SPF in terms of how they handled it.
Yes, and remember that if you're a 501c3 and that's what you're doing, you can always pass through those donations just like a 501c4. I know I'm a member of one branch, they're 501c3, but all the Tech Trek donations go straight into a Camp Treasure and onto SPF, and they're made payable to SPF.
Great, thanks. There were a couple questions about the sales tax. First of all, what if you had a fundraising auction and didn't know about the sales tax requirement? Well, here is straight from publication 19. If you held a fundraising sales event without applying for a permit, you should register with us right away. Registering promptly may allow you to file and pay any tax due before any penalty and interest are due. So they're aware that, you know, we might not all be quite on top of things. In terms of how you calculate sales tax for auction sales, I think be aware that the sales tax rate, it's going to be somewhere between 7% and some jurisdictions it's up to 10% or even a little bit more. I was just looking at the table and Santa Monica was 10.25%. So you want to know, you know, kind of what the amount is going to be it's on the total price of the auction item. So that's what you'll be remitting in terms of sales tax. So it's
good to know that you can register late because if they look at it and say, well, if you do that, then that encourages you to pay sales tax and us to collect more money. So
that's right. That's right. So
all the auction items, the silent auction items, you have to pay sales tax on them?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, you're not, and remember, in terms of sales tax, it's actually the purchaser that's paying the sales tax. You're just collecting it and remitting it to the state. But because of the way that an auction would usually, you know, you have, I don't know, let's say a hand blown glass item that somebody has given you, and so you sell the item for $100, and of that, somewhere between 7 and 10% is going to go to the state as the tax portion of that purchase.
Okay. And my groups has some jewelry sales too.
Mm-hmm,
I think someone's just donating jewelry, but so that needs to.
Same thing, yes.
Yeah.
So the person, the donor of the item, you know, they are making a donation. And are you a 501c3 branch?
I think so. That's in our bylaws. I haven't seen anything different.
Okay, well, the difference between a 501c3 and a 501c4 is that in a 501c3, the donations that the organization receives are tax deductible to the donor. Neither the 501c3 or the 501c4 pays income tax, but the donor of an item of a contribution to a 501c3 could take the amount of their donation off of their income tax.
Oh.
So that would be the difference. But
what we are.
okay, but
it's around, and I didn't have a clear answer.
Well, and one of the things, there was a question early on about how long to save information, and I think Kathy, maybe you or Indrani could answer this, that in terms of general records,
7 years.
7 years,
Yeah.
but one item you should keep forever is your determination letter from the
Yes.
IRS, which tells
Yes.
you if you are a
Mm.
501c3 and
Determination.
what your number is, because you're going to be asked for that in many cases. I see some nodding heads of people who've encountered that. So,
Yes, as I said, that's your perm file.
Right.
Permanent with a capital P
right,
and carries forward.
Yes,
forever.
that is very important.
right.
Hmm.
And then let's see, we have to register getting the sales permit. Yes, so that's where you want to get a seller's permit, and that's when you get the copy of the file from our PowerPoint, it will have the web address on there that you can use to register for a seller's permit.
Permit.
Okay.
To register.
So I think that is pretty much the questions that had come in. I did see that quite a few organizations talked about that they have a financial review process and they've gotten some good ideas, which is great.
That is good to hear. I'm glad that that's beneficial to the branches who do it.
So donated items for an auction, we have to charge sales tax. Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
I know it's hard to think of. That's why we thought we really have to talk about some of these items. Probably, how many have actually filed 1099s for rent if it was to a non-corporation? Is that part of the process? Because our thoughts were that this might not be readily evident as a requirement for a charitable organization. So we did want to start getting this information when branch finance officers look at it and say, well, I'm supposed to do everything I'm supposed to know all the laws and I have to do everything according to generally accepted accounting principles and follow the local regulations. It's good to know what they are. So.
And here's one that just came in terms of someone's getting an AEW Fund Fellow to come and speak. Great, glad to hear that. And they'll be paying hotel, meal, mileage, and honorarium. Does that qualify for a 1099? And I would say yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
The place I connected with 1099s, I was treasurer of a choral society. And so we would have soloists and orchestral musicians, and of course our regular accompanist and music director. So calculating all of those that were over $600 a year and filling out the 1099s was an annual activity for sure.
Anybody think they're going to have more than 10 1099s or it's a number 10 limit for those?
No.
Again, most won't. I know a lot of branches, they may have a speaker, but the speaker is, it's a more of a nominal honorarium. It might be $50 and donated to a charity of their choice. So they're not even receiving it, but the expenses aren't high, or maybe their rent, they've managed to keep the rent below the $600, or it's to a corporation. So there's a lot of things that place the payment in a do not have to file the 1099 because of the amount or the organization itself being a corporation, but you still have to look at it. And depending on how many transactions and how much you pay, it would dictate the number that you're going to do. The big thing probably would be in your fundraising events. So, who are you paying and how much becomes more important for the fundraising event. Any
Well, I think,
questions about monthly reporting on your financials? By now, you've done quite a few months, even if you're a new treasurer.
Mhm.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm a new treasurer and I just had a quick question. When I was putting all of the finances together, I did get confirmation that we have Tech Trek funds that were already paid for, like they were sent to the
Yes.
Tech Trek. So I was told not to include it in our financials anymore because it was already like sent out and accounted for. Does that still have to be on the financials monthly somewhere?
Are you talking about, are you just passing through donor checks?
I'm assuming so. We haven't done anything since I've taken over.
Oh, okay.
We're just now revitalizing this branch. So it's been a little bit of a journey, but
Yeah.
I did find out that I was told that I didn't have to put them on the like as restricted or anything because they were already paid for, like it's already been accounted for.
So
But I
it's
just
just
didn't
been
know.
remitted to SPF and it didn't
Yes.
go through your books at all? Because I
Not-
know,
Yeah.
branches, some of the instructions that are already on the website, how to be an accountant section, will actually show you want to do a report and you want to be all encompassing. It could be, well, Tech Trek doesn't go through your books. But you're calculating, you're keeping track, because you're keeping track of how much money you're collecting from donors and remitting to SPF, because you want to know how much money you have available to select girls and send to camp. But it's not running through any of your branch financial statements. But you can report, here's the branch financial statements. And, oh, by the way, this fiscal year, we've collected so much money, and the money that we have on file at SPR with a camp is this. So you
Okay.
could just report that, but it's not an integral part of your branch financial statements. Branch financial statements are the monies going through your bank accounts.
Right. Got it. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
and Claudia, I'm not quite sure I understand your question. If you have someone that paid for an event and or you pay for the event and it includes sales tax, so what is
Like if you pay a caterer for an event fundraising, or if you pay an entertainment, but you're also paying the sales tax is included
Yeah.
on the
Yes.
bill.
yes,
Would you have to still pay sales tax?
yes,
Since
generally,
you paid it to them.
yes. So, and they're going to remit it to the state because basically, as I said, in California, as a nonprofit tax exempt organization, we're not exempt from paying sales tax. So if
Right.
you go down to Staples and buy envelopes, you're going to pay sales tax, even though you're using the envelopes for the purpose of running your branch. So I think
So your
that
basic, I'm a little, because you're already paying sales tax when you buy them.
Mhm.
yes,
But you're not reselling them.
No.
If you bought something and you were going to turn around and resell it, you can, with the manufacturer that you're buying that, like the T-shirt that Carol's branch would buy, you could tell them, I'm a reseller. Here's my reseller license number, my sales number, and they won't charge you sales tax. That's when you have to charge sales tax to the end purchaser, the end
So it's
user,
basically when
and
you
you remit
sell it.
that. In the
Okay.
case where you've hired a caterer and they're handling all of it, you do pay the sales tax, but they're remitting it. You don't
Okay.
have to
Okay.
worry about it. That's the advantage of using a caterer there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
okay. And then there's a question again about the Tech Trek balance. So it sounds like you pass on part of the money and save a little bit for future possible overages. So
I'm not quite sure what is it. Are you a 501c3 that is collecting donations directly into your account?
Yes, we have a 501c3 for our community projects and a C4 for our branch. So
Gotcha.
the C3 for all of our projects does fundraising. We have running account balances that we
Yeah.
keep for each project.
Yeah.
So we never for Trek forward everything that we have to California SPF. We just forward what the fees are for the number of girls we send to Tech Trek that year.
Correct. So you're holding, so when you forward the fees for the actual girls, because remember the 1099 is issued to the recipient of the
Right.
award. So if you've got money sitting, there's nobody getting an award.
Correct.
This fund.
Correct.
But the key becomes, if you are then as a branch sending it to SPF, are you issuing a 1099 to those girls at this point?
We never issued N1099.
Never issued it. And that's the one we're trying to clarify with SPF.
That's what my question was. We presume you'll cover it.
Exactly. Those are all the different scenarios. So if you want to email me,
Yeah.
you know, it's cfo@auw-ca.org.
Well, I think if you're going to survey us and then we'll tell you.
That's the idea. I'm saying, what do you do? And then do you issue a 1099? Yes or no? Let's get all the scenarios in and then go into, okay, SPF, you know, did research. Because if we just look at the IRS records for 1099, it would say, yeah, you give them a 1099. But SPF may have gotten some waivers. They have some other input. I'm trying to get that input and find out, okay, what is it that says you don't have to issue that? But it wouldn't be triggered by what you received. Again, the award that's being reported on the miscellaneous 1099 is to the recipient of that award. So if it's just sitting there and it hasn't been awarded to anybody,
Yeah.
There's nothing to 1099.
And we don't give money to the girls. It goes-
No,
Yeah.
at that point, you're sending it to SPF
Right.
to cover the camp. So you're sending it into the camp. You say, okay, I'm sending 5 girls to your camp and maybe a couple to camp. You're sending that money in, and your the camp treasurer will then forward it on to SPF. So it ends up with SPF. The actual cash, the checks will end up with SPF, and they will record that for the camp. In the camp treasurer's recording, this is for this branch. They now have this much in funds available at this camp for X number of girls. So that's the one we're trying to clarify. Does that trigger a 1099 requirement? And, you know, we're trying to get the specific reasons why it would or would not. So that's coming. Do we have any other questions about
I think
budgeting?
that
Anything?
pretty much covers our questions.
All right.
Thank you
Well-
all very much.
Thank you for attending, and your contributions, you know, of your experience is also really valuable when you say, you know, yes, you do the review, and that has been a positive, you know, feedback on that. And you have different scenarios on remitting your funds to SPF in some cases for Tech Trek. So that's all really helpful. This is a community of people, and if you have any questions, be sure to send them in. As I said, excuse me, we will be posting. This has been recorded. It will be posted, and the document, you know, all the PowerPoint presentation will be posted, as well as the Q&A that we have. And if I can post the polling requirement, you know, polls we took, I'm going to do that. But I do want to get a survey and get responses so we have a better understanding of what branches are doing. And again, our next presentation will be in March, and it'll be on membership. There was a webinar last year, but at that point, Hub may have looked a bit different than it does now. And I know that's probably an issue too. Again, if anybody has questions that they want to cover, send them in, because that allows us to address those before we set up the peer group session. I also want to ask you, what we have is kind of annual preparing your year-end financial statements and getting ready for those to be used for reporting next November, or sending into requesting national to report for you. So if you have other things you want to go over and that you think will be helpful, please send those in, because I have a feeling that given what we've gone over, the annual reporting will not take a lot of time, and you may have other issues you really want to go over. So I'd like to get an idea of what those are. That would be really helpful to make put into our June session. And I hope you all have wonderful holidays and you get time off and you're having fun with family and friends. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Where did it go? Okay, I'll leave. Thanks.
Well,